Welcome to the SAINTCON Hallway.
Thank you. It's awesome being here. Like, talk about a conference punching above its weight class. This is my first time here, so I didn't know it was going to be this cool.
And do you have a handle?
I do. It's Dwyer, though.
Just Dwyer. Fair enough. And I was going to ask how you earned that handle, but I think that's pretty self-explanatory.
It was passed down many years of generations.
And good OPSEC, right?
Yeah. Well, I used to go by Tactical Sec.
Okay.
But then everyone just calls me Dwyer anyways.
I did know that. You had a handle on your bio, Tactical.
Yeah, so I used to be Tactical Sec, which I had for many years, but everyone's always called me Dwyer. It never stuck. So I was like, I'm just going to be Dwyer.
Right.
There's not a lot of Dwyers out there, so.
I had that same play. I had a handle. Nobody cared. So Pope it is.
Yeah.
They're like, your last name is enough. First time in Utah? How many times have you been here?
This is my first time in Utah, and I gotta say, I get it. I get why people live here. So I've been going on hikes every morning because I live in Pittsburgh and we don't have anything like this.
You go in Timpanogos? How far did you go?
Well, I did the peak of Kiev or Kien or something like that.
I don't even know that one.
It's off of the Rock Canyon Trail.
Nice.
It was like 7,300 feet. It was decent. And then I did the top of the Y, the BYU Y.
Oh, yeah.
I did that this morning.
You went up there?
Yeah.
That's
beautiful.
Awesome. Yeah.
As I'm walking around, I'm like, I called my wife and I was like, listen, you need to come out here because I get it. I understand why people live here. Everyone's so nice. It's so clean. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Happy Valley, right?
Yeah.
They call it Happy Valley here in Provo.
Yeah.
If somebody wanted to approach you and talk to you, but not cybersecurity, like they're at a conference here and they want to come up and talk to you, we obviously covered hiking a little bit. Mm-hmm. What others is something that is interest of you that they could come talk about that you guys could build some kinship around?
Fitness. Like I'm a part owner of a CrossFit gym outside of Pittsburgh, which is like a big part of my life is mostly mild levels of fitness for myself, but I love introducing people to fitness and weightlifting and watching them get better through that stuff. And like, there's nothing better than seeing someone walk in the gym for the first time and they only look at their shoes. And in 6 months they walk in, eyes up, chest back, and they're like themselves and they become more confident in themselves. And you see these people like blossom into people that they never thought they would be before. And it's just because they feel better about themselves. And I really love that. So like that's a huge passion of mine, mostly through coaching and developing people and introducing them to ways that they can better about themselves. And you see it play out. It's like, oh, they do their hour in the gym and that's great. But the carryover into their personal and professional lives is my favorite part, talking to them and they get more engaged and they're like, just feel better about their life, right? We're here for a good time, not a long time, right? So the more I love being able to have people expand their horizons and find out more about themselves. Everyone's stronger than they think, And when you push yourself a little bit, you're like, well, I can do more than I ever thought I could do. And then you see them like burst out of their shell. So I'm happy to talk about fitness in any time. It doesn't have to be just I get the whole CrossFit jokes and things like that, and they're funny, but the best fitness is the one that you'll do every day. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. You're speaking here this year?
I am. Yeah, I have the honor to speak here. There's so many really good people and really talented people. And I'm like, well, I'm up next, guys.
And you have, you did a open source threat hunting?
Yeah,
framework?
Grifter and I did that in 2021. And that was the open threat hunting framework, which was taking a step back. Grifter and I used to work together, built up this threat hunting practice, and through that, like talking to a bunch of different organizations that had implemented threat hunting services. And then I started noticing that like the rubric for who was going to be successful had a far less to do with the technical capabilities of the program and more about the organization and the people and how you actually structure a team to be successful. And so we released the open threat hunting framework to say, everyone wants to jump into the deep end and do like threat hunts for like cool new malware or adversaries that they see on Twitter or X or whatever it's called now. But really, that 6 months ahead of there, when you're like defining what threat hunting means to your organization, what is the value add? How are we going to structure? What's the purpose of us as a threat hunting? That's actually what determines the effectiveness of it. So it's not hyper technical, but that all spurred out of like me being an insane person and like reaching out to all these different managers of threat hunting teams and interviewing them and figuring out who is the high performers, and then say, oh, the people in the high performers, let's take that down and try to distill into like different ways you can take a threat hunting program and launch it so that the building blocks are there. So then you can do the cool technical stuff. But if you just do the cool technical stuff, you'll never be able to explain the value of it. And then you won't get funding and so on and so forth.
Right. Right. So you've moved now into like labs research?
Yeah, so I work for Binary Defense right now, and I'm the head of what we call ARC Labs, which is Adversarial Research and Capabilities, and it's the R&D lab for the MDR service, and it's kind of a community serving aspect and then internal, trying to make us better, like looking into like what's happening in the threat landscape, what are adversaries doing, what are new malware samples, analyzing those and distributing those out to say like, hey, this is new and interesting. This is how you would go about detecting it. But more importantly, how does this fit into the larger criminal landscape so that you can start to figure out how you perceive the threat landscape as your organization? Because, I've used this metaphor before. Let me try it on you because it hasn't landed.
I'm excited. I'm ready.
Okay. You ever been to Millennium Park in Chicago? Or, the big bean, the big reflective bean?
Yes.
Okay. If you go up to that thing, depending on where you are, everyone has a unique perspective of what's going on behind them.
Right.
Right. If you stand closer, things look bigger. If you stand further away, then things look smaller and things get warped. And I feel like that is a good metaphor for the threat landscape. Is me from the outside trying to tell you in your organization how you perceive the threat landscape is not the best way, because there are going to be similarities, but every company is different. They have different services and technology and things that are important to their organization, and they need to understand how they perceive the threat landscape so that we are designing our security strategy for things that are relevant and realistic to my organization, right? And that is part of the things that we do in ARC Labs, is trying to say like different industries, how this would apply, what is the end goal for this attack that would potentially happen, and like what is the potential impact of that? Now take that in, and how would you apply that to your larger sort of security strategy, which is kind of what I'm talking about today.
Right. So you're going to come out with a framework on how to do that in a few years?
Maybe. But I do think that there is a constant theme, and I've done it myself. Like if you look at and read security blogs, which I'm sure you do, you probably write security blogs. And there's a very, very common sentence that's used that. It's like, in the ever-evolving threat landscape, right, in the ever-changing threat landscape. And I sat back and I said, is it always changing? Because if you perceive things by MITRE attack techniques, it can look like it changes all the time. But if you look at it from the fact of like, what is the goal and the objective of the adversary? Right. It hasn't really changed that much. It's ransomware, data theft, business email compromise, and cryptojacking are the largest threats that apply to everyone. And their goals and the objectives have stayed the same. Make money. They achieve that through those different threats. And here's the impact of that. So that's actually pretty static. And that's a good thing to build strategies around. And we can use the technical bits to support that. Right. But if I am aligning what security means at my organization to the goals and the objectives of the adversary, that actually doesn't change that much. And that gives us more runway to say, oh, it's not always changing, right? Right. Like ransomware has been around since enterprise ransomware, 2017, 2016. Yeah. And it's persisted throughout as the largest threat to any organization. I don't care who you are. And their objectives haven't changed, right?
No, make money.
Yeah, makes money, and they do that through disruption and stealing data, right? So that's what we need to design our strategy around. That's pretty much what I'm going to be talking about today. It's just kind of like how we can rethink about how to perceive and understand the threat landscape so that it's not so chaotic. Because if the longer things stay the same, you can actually build longer roadmaps around that and be like, oh, I actually just need to look whenever the objectives or the goals change, then I need to reevaluate. Quick side story. So the last time I saw the goals and the objectives like rapidly change was associated with ransomware. And if I came up through incident response, right? And I remember the first IR that I ever worked where we had a banking Trojan start spawning Cobalt Strike beacons. And from an IR point of view, we were completely caught off guard because we had never seen anything like that. I'm like, why does this look like the old credit card theft stuff from the fin groups in the 2010s? But it's all starting from this massive Dridex infection. And I think about that all the time. And I'm like, that was a hallmark change in the objective of a banking Trojan, where it went from just trying to steal credit card information to being an access broker. And then the whole world burnt to the ground.
Yeah.
So to me, like, that's a much more like tangible, static, like dependable way to perceive the threat landscape. And we can change things underneath that. But if we're using that as our guiding light to say, how are we approaching security for my organization? I think that gives us a lot more stability to build things around.
Right. Yeah. I like that. Focus on their objectives. If you want to make money, they're going to do it as easy as they can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's even from the like nation state or whatever APT or whatever word you want to use for them, hasn't really changed that much either.
They want your data.
They want you to espionage, operational disruption.
Right.
It's always the same stuff. Like, so do we actually need to change it all the time? And then we use the markers when those things change. So then we have to be like, oh my God, this is an emergency.
If you, I'm tangent because you started it. If you were a nation state and got your objective, would you ransomware on the way out?
Oh yeah. And I've worked those cases before too.
Because now you're only paying attention to the ransomware, not the exfil data or whatever the other objective was.
Right. Because you don't, like, the lines between these groups are so blurred right now.
Or sell access to somebody to do it.
Yes.
All the logs, everything they're going to care about is this disruption. Don't watch this hand over here. Anyway, I thought about that a lot. I'm like, I would definitely do that if I...
Oh, absolutely. And it works. I did a talk back on that in 2020, 2021-ish, but it was the same case. It was like a RIA TrickBot ransomware. It was like, oh, we worked literal hundreds of those. And another RER firm had come in and done that. And then the client just asked us for the warm and fuzzies and go back in. And I was extraordinarily close to like sending the report, be like, yep, that's what this is. And then I got one malware log for a Cobalt Strike beacon that happened before TrickBot. It's like, that's weird. That's not how this worked. And I pulled on this thread and found out that it was an espionage group for 2 years prior.
Dang.
Yeah.
Yeah. Clever. What's next for Dwyer?
What's next for me is trying to taking the principles of everything that I've learned from incident response and threat hunting and figuring out ways that we can use the awesome technology that we have on us now to operationalize that more in a SOC. Like what's really cool is my prior life. I spent most of my life in research and development labs at academia, where we did a lot of research on machine learning, and we wrote all these papers in the early 2010s. The problem is that no one ever had enough data to make those cool machine learning things practical to implement. And now that we have generative AI, it's actually, you can create synthetic data enough where the cool research that was 10, 15 years ago in machine learning, you can actually operationalize it. And what this dream of saying, like, the AI overlords is an incredible tool that if we do it correctly, we can shift everyone up a skill level.
Right.
And I want to see that where we're not thinking about replacing any humans and we're just enhancing them, turbocharging them, and making it a sustainable life. I don't know if you ever worked at a help desk or a SOC. I did. I came from absolute nothing. I had no idea what a computer was when I first got started, but that job is hard.
Yeah.
Day in and day out, doing the same thing over and over again.
And you make it all the way down to the ones and twos, right?
Yeah.
No, I never get past the mediums, right? So yeah, if you can do any of those faster, it's like even when SOAR's coming out, they're like, oh, it's going to automate and reduce jobs. And I'm like, well, hopefully you can just do more things because there's still way too much to do.
Yeah, and it's also, it's like if you've worked at it and you get it, you know, how well can we trust that severity scale?
Sure.
Because usually there's telemetry in there, be like, oh, it's a low priority, but this was the key, right? We saw that in the Target breaches and things like that, where they had a ton of alerts
and stuff,
and they were like, oh, but they were like low priority kind of stuff, and it's like we have an incredible opportunity for the first time ever to reduce noise by making machines deal with noise.
Right.
And so I have this new sort of not an idea, and I think most people are kind of thinking about this, but how can we do this in a cost-effective manner to make it accessible to everyone? And it's not just this black box where you're like, oh yeah, we'll do that. Trust us, just buy more of my thing and you'll get all the fancy whiz-bang tools. I'm like, I don't think that's right or fair. And it's like, if you want to push the edge, like you can do that, let's make it accessible to everyone and let's move on to the next thing, right? Because there's plenty of other problems to solve, and don't just like give someone financial handcuffs to say, oh yeah, but you got to buy this black box and it will do all the fancy whiz bang things. I'm like, I don't think that is the right way to do security.
Right. Well, that's exciting. We are happy that you came out here to Utah.
Me too.
We're happy you're able to hike some mountains and touch a Y up there.
Yeah, I'm coming back next year. I don't think this has been an incredible experience. I love it.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, we appreciate you presenting and coming out, and thanks for joining me in the hallway.
Thank you.